Hello and welcome to this Swift tutorial. In this video I'm going to show you how to make a countdown timer. So if you want to call yourself a developer, you can't be using the generic Apple countdown timer, you have to be using your own. So in this video I'm going to show you how you create a basic countdown timer so you can count down everything. So if that is something you want to know how to do, just keep watching this video and I will show you exactly how, step by step, and explaining everything in great detail. So let us create a new Xcode project, and I'm going to call mine, it's going to be a single view application first of all, and then I'm going to call it countdown. And I'm going to go to next, make sure that the language is set to Swift right here, then click next and then save it somewhere on your computer. And the first thing we are going to do is we're going to lay out our application so that everything looks as it should look. And we do that by visiting main.storyboard. And I'm going to lay this out in an iPhone 5 and already now set the simulator to an iPhone 5 or SE. And now I'm just going to lay out how everything is going to look. So first of all, we are going to need a label that displays how much time our countdown is set to. Now, in order to make this easy, we're not going to have a minute and seconds, but we're just going to operate in seconds. But of course, you can add that afterwards, but right now we're just going to focus on seconds. So it's going to be 0 seconds to start with, and we're just going to make that label wide. I'm going to center the label. I'm going to center the text in the label and make the font a bit bigger. And as a placeholder, I'm just going to write 30. So this is going to display how much time our user has set the countdown to. And in order for him or her to be able to set the number, we could either have a text field where the user writes in the amount of seconds, but I'm just going to use a slider which lets the user slide up and down in order to choose how many seconds the user wants. I'm just going to place the slider right there. And then when the user is satisfied with his number, he's going to have a start button to press. I'm not going to search for start, but I'm going to search for a button. I'm going to drag that in here, and we're going to call it start. I'm going to have a black background color. And the text is going to be white in my case. And it's nice that the user can start the countdown, but if he has made an error or everything is good, he doesn't need it anymore, then he also is going to get a stop button so that he can stop and invalidate the timer. So this is all we are going to need as an interface. And first of all, we are going to concentrate on enabling the user to drag this in order to change the label, so the amount of seconds that he has chosen. So right now we're just going to drag in all the elements so that we have access to it later. So now you're going to hold down the control button, and just drag over and then name this one label. Let's see, label. It's going to be an outlet, connect. Then we are going to drag in the slider, which is, let's drag that in. I'm going to name it a slider, and it is going to be an action, and make sure that it's set to a UI slider. And then on top of that, I'm just also going to drag it in as an outlet, which means that we can change the properties of it. Right now we're just created an action, so it now only listens for our actions. But in order for us to be able to change its appearance or how it looks, we need to also import it as an outlet. So I'm just going to do that. Slider outlet is the name I'm going to give it. And let's see, I like to have it like that. And then we're going to import both of the buttons as actions. So start, and then we're going to have the stop button, so that they each call a certain action. And if we want to hide one of the buttons, then of course we're also going to need an outlet there, because right now they're only calling actions, but if we want to change their properties, we're going to need them as an outlet also. So start outlet, and then we're going to need the stop outlet. So that is, I think, all we need right now. So we are now just going to head over to the view controller and do the rest of this tutorial in the code, more or less. So let's begin. So now our user is able to slide the slider, but right now the slider doesn't do anything. As we can see here, it's pretty empty. So what we're going to create is we're going to create a variable that's named seconds, which is going to keep track of the amount of seconds that the user has selected. But there's one thing that we forgot. If we now head over to storyboard that I just remembered, and that is the slider. Now we can set the current value of the slider, the minimum value of the slider, and the maximum value of the slider. Now a countdown isn't too useful if the user only can select 1 second, so we're going to set that to 30, now 60. The minimum amount is going to be 5 seconds, and the current value is going to be 30 seconds as stated in this label above here. So now we're going to head back to the view controller, and we're going to say this is the amount of seconds that the user has selected. And then when the user drags the slider around, we're going to update that. So update it. So we're going to say seconds is equal to sender dot value. So sender is the slider, it's the one that's sending the value. And because this is a float variable, which means there's a lot of decimals to it, we're going to convert it to an int, an integer, in order to only get a whole number, which looks much better. And now we're going to also update the label. So we're going to say label.text is equal to string. We have to convert the number to a string equal to seconds. So we're going to convert the seconds to a string and then place it in our label. So now that when we drag on our slider, it's going to update the label with the amount of seconds that the user wanted. And now we're going to create the start button so that the countdown starts counting down. Now then we're going to need a timer, so we're going to create that. Let timer is equal to timer. Let's see, I think it's with a big T. Timer dot scheduled timer with interval, this one. And the interval is going to be 1 second. The target is going to be self. Selector we're going to come back to. User info, we don't have any. And it's going to repeat, else it's going to be a useless timer. Now every time this timer clicks at 1 second, we're going to call a certain function. Now that's what we're defining here, which function we wanted to select. So we say in selector.viewController, because that is where the function is going to exist, and I'm just going to call it counter. And now we're going to create that function right here, so func. And we're going to call it counter. And here is our function. Now what do we want our function to do? Every time our counter clicks at 1 second, what do we want it to do? Well, we want it to take this number and then -1. So seconds minus equals 1. So now we're taking seconds and then -1. And then we want to update the label. So we say label.text is equal to seconds. So now our user can select the amount of seconds that he wants, and we can then click on the start button and the timer will start and start counting down the seconds. Now we also want to do one more thing before we try to run the app, and that is to check if the seconds are 0, because if they are, we're going to stop the timer. So we're going to say seconds, if the seconds is equal to 0, then we are going to invalidate the timer. But in order to do that, we have to make this variable global so that we can access it. So we're just going to say timer here, and then we're going to create the timer variable up here. It's equal to timer, so that we can access it down here. So we're going to say timer dot invalidate and make this a variable so that we can change it down here. That error should be fixed now. Yes, variable, let's see. Okay, so now everything is pretty much set up in order for us to start the timer, but now we're also going to put in a function so that we can stop the timer. And this is actually pretty simple. And I want my timer to reset at 30 seconds whenever I click on stop timer. So I'm going to say stop. No, no, I'm not going to say stop. I'm going to set timer dot invalidate. So we're going to stop the timer. That's the first step that we do. And then we update the seconds, the amount of seconds. So we say seconds is equal to 30 because that is our default. And then we're also going to say that we're going to set the slider to 30. So slider dot value, let's see, set slider outlet, right? Slider outlet dot current value. Let's see, set value is probably the right one. Yes, set value is equal to 30, and we're going to animate it. Now we have updated the slider, and then we're also going to update our label to display that it has been reset, which is going to be 30. And I put it in marks here because we need it as a string because this is a text label. So now everything is pretty much set up if there isn't something I have overlooked. And the best way to find that out if there's something I have overlooked is just to start it and give it a test drive. So here is our app. Let's try to drag it around. Works beautifully. Although the seconds disappear, that we can change it very easily by saying label.text plus and then add on a string seconds. We're just going to repair it right away. And right here also, plus seconds. Was it a capital S? I don't remember, but I'm just going to do it like that right now. And then 30 seconds right here. Okay, so we're going to drag it around, and then we're going to say start. And as you can see, the timer starts counting down, and when we click stop, it sets itself back to 30, and the slider is also back to 30. But one thing that I have noticed is that when we click start, we can still drag around on this one, which you can leave. It actually isn't too bad of a feature. You can drag it around while it's counting down. So you may leave it at this, but I'm going to opt into both hide the start button when I click on start so that I can start numerous of timers at once. As you can see, that just ends in chaos. So I'm going to hide the start button, and I'm going to hide the slider. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So when I click the start button, let's see, right here, I'm going to say slider outlet dot hidden is hidden, let's see, is hidden is equal to true. And the start button, start outlet dot is hidden is also equal to true. So this hides both of the outlets when we click start button, and then of course we want it to reappear when we click the stop button. So we're going to say slider.outlet is hidden is equal to false, is equal to false. Let's see, false. And then we also wanted them to reappear when the timer is done. So we're saying here slider.outlet is hidden is equal to false, and also here false, like this. Let's try to run it again and see how it looks now. So here it is. Okay, it was a capital S, but let's say we drag it around. Okay, we should probably also have a space there. We drag it around, we click start, and it hides, and then when we click stop, they reappear. So that is how we want it to, but we're just going to add in the space and the capital S so that it stays pretty much the same. And there is one more thing I would like to add, and that is when it counts to 0. So when it reaches 0, I wanted to play a sound. So I wanted to play an alarm sound. And we do that by adding in an audio player. But right now you have to find a certain track. I have chosen this one. Let's see. Let's jack the volume up. Okay, so a very cozy sound. So that's the one I'm going to go for, and I'm going to drag it in here, and I'm going to just call it 1. That's all. It's a simple name. So now we're going to create the audio player, and we do that in the view did load method. So the second the app launches, we want our audio player to be created. Now, creating an audio player is not the same as playing it. We just want to create it down here. But first of all, we need to create the audio player up here. So we're just going to say var audio player is equal to AV. Let's see. First, we have to import before I forget this, AV Foundation, which stands for Audio and Video Foundation, and then we're going to create an AV audio player, which is going to handle all the audio playing tasks. And that's what we're going to create down here. We're going to set it up the second the app launches. So we're going to need a do, and then we're going to say let is equal to audio path, which is the path to this audio file. And we find it by saying bundle dot main dot path for resource, and the resource is named 1. Make sure that it's a string, and then the ending is .mp3 like this. And then we're going to try to create a player, and it's going, let's see, we called it audio player, audio not path but player is equal to AV audio player, and then it's going to be equal to the contents of URL, and the URL is a URL. It's going to be a file URL with path, and it's an audio path and an exclamation mark, because we're sure that this exists as a legit file. I'm going to go through this all at the end one more time, and if this fails, we're going to catch the error and do something with it. Right now I'm not going to do something with it, but I'm just going to write error. So that's where you are going to process your error, and then we are going to play it when the timer reaches 0. So we're going to say player.play, audio player, I always forget that, audio player.play, and then when we click on stop, let's see, when we click on stop right here, wait, there's one problem here, and that is when it plays, we don't have the option to stop it. Yes, we do have that. Awesome. So we're going to say audio player dot stop. Let's try to run this and see what we've got, if there is any errors we need to correct, but else I think we got a pretty operational app here. So here's our app. Let's try to drag it around. That works beautifully. Let's try to click the stop button. Okay, that works. No errors there. Let's put it to 5 seconds and let's start it. Awesome, exactly as we wanted to. And then we click on stop to stop the audio. Awesome, and it resets. Now exactly as we wanted to, but we might not want the start button and the slider to appear when it reaches 0. So we're not going to make them appear when it reaches 0. So that we do by simply removing these right there. Now everything is exactly as you wanted to. Here is your fully functional alarm app. And of course you can add on minutes, you can expand it so that it can count more than 60 seconds. But for this tutorial purpose, this is exactly what we need. We're just going to count down one more time just to hear the awesome sound. And bam, bam, everything is working. We click on stop, I got the alarm, bam, and we can start from scratch. So that is how you create it. Let's go through everything once again as I promised. So first we laid out our whole storyboard, so how our app was going to look. Let's just close this. And we had a label, a slider, and 2 buttons, which we all imported here. Then we have a variable here, which keeps track of the amount of seconds that our user wants to count down. We also created a timer, which is going to do the down counting, and we created an audio player, which handles all the stuff with playing the audio when the timer has reached 0. We imported all the outlets that we needed, and when our user drags the slider, the seconds is going to be equal to the value of the sender, which is the slider. So the slider sends the information that, hey, I'm being changed, and then we take the value from him, convert it to an integer, which means getting rid of the decimals, and then set that equal to the seconds, and we display that in our text label. We then, when the user clicks on start, in order to start it, we create a new timer. So we don't start the timer, but we create a whole new timer with this interval of 1 second. And every second it calls the function named counter. So it says counter, do your stuff, and it runs through all this code. And it repeats, yes, it does that, because else it would be a useless app. And when we also click start button, we hide the start button and we hide the slider. And this function that is being called every second says seconds minus 1, and then it says sets the text label equal to the current amount of seconds. And if it notices that the current seconds is equal to 0, then it invalidates the timer, which basically means it removes the timer, and then it plays our audio track. When we click on stop, either prematurely before the timer is done or after the timer is done, we stop the timer and we set the amount of seconds to 30, which is the default, and we set the label to 30 right here, and we also set the slider to 30. So we set everything to 30, and then we just set the storyboard as it was by showing all the buttons once again. And here we just created the audio player, which we have to do with a do. So we have to use this do, and we're going to try to do this, and if it doesn't work, then we're going to catch the error, just do something if it fails. And what we're basically doing here is we're getting the path of this file right here, and then we're trying to set the audio player's content to be equal to this one right here. And we're trying it to see if it works. If it doesn't, then we don't get a crash because we have all this right here. So that is how you create a basic count and timer. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned for my future Swift tutorial videos. And of course, thank you for watching.